I think we'll just go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to the North Houston Space Society meeting. This is our August meeting. We have these monthly. And I just want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded and we'll post it onto YouTube and our website and Facebook, etc. And if you want to turn on your video, there's a little place in the bottom left-hand side of the screen where you can start and stop the video. It won't be possible for you to unmute yourself. We currently have it locked down so that people are muted whenever they enter and they can't unmute themselves. Whenever we get to the Q&A towards the later part of the meeting, and it's less likely that it would cause an interruption, we'll enable your ability to unmute yourself. Chat's also turned off. And our agenda for today is I have a few opening remarks that I was going to make. And then we'll have a space communicator speech, and then Greg Stanley will give recent space news, and we'll have Jennifer from ASTROBOTIC talk about the great work they're doing to really open up the moon to exploration through some of the activities that they're doing. After that, we'll have a question and answer, and if there's any time left over, we'll open it up for people to share their space experiences since the last meeting. If you watched the rocket launch or saw Neowise, the comet, or maybe you saw some really interesting space video, movie, or read a book, or had some thoughts. So, and then we'll try to end at 4. So to start out, humanity really has just one question to answer. And we have lots of questions to answer, but all those questions can be framed within this one question. And that question is to be or not to be. And what I mean by that is all of life and civilization and everything has been on this one little speck in the universe, Earth, which seems so huge, but is actually really a finite, really small piece of the entire solar system, and especially extremely small whenever you look at the entire universe. And we know, based upon looking at other suns like our sun, that its time is limited. Now that time is in the billions of years. May seem like a really long way from now, but there's definitely an end to the Earth. And there's lots of things that we need to figure out before that. And lots of adventures and opportunities. The question is, are we going to limit ourselves to just the Earth? Or are we going to actually expand out to the rest of the solar system, to the rest of the universe, and allow for life to flourish throughout this universe? And the vision of the Space Society, the National Space Society, is really promoting this viewpoint that we want to have people living and working in thriving communities beyond the Earth is definitely part of it. But the other part of it is there are a lot of resources in space that can benefit humanity, not only in space, but also on the Earth. We have 2 billionaires that have very different visions when it comes to space. Elon Musk is pressing hard towards building that city on Mars that would be self-sufficient and ensure or greatly reduce the chances of civilization ending. And then you have Jeff Bezos, who really sees Earth as being the only place for humanity, but space would allow for us to generate energy, mine resources, do manufacturing, and that ultimately will probably create artificial habitats that would be worlds of their own that will be future homes to humanity. So it's really kind of interesting to see that just on the energy production front, a very small amount of the sun's energy actually falls onto the Earth. And so the potential for space-based solar power is an example to really empower the Earth and civilization going forward is definitely something we need to figure out how to take advantage of. So in order to promote those visions, we have monthly meetings. We used to meet at the library, and we'll meet at the library again. And this picture is not us being ahead of the curve with respect to COVID-19. This picture is us taking a tour of nanoracks. And that's what we do, is basically invite speakers to come talk to us, and we invite the community to try to educate a broad section of the community about what's happening in space, the potential of space, and what our future could be. And we also take tours of places to kind of educate ourselves and to get firsthand experience. So if you're interested in this vision, I would highly encourage you to join our email list. So if you go to our website, northhoustonspace.org, on the left-hand side, there's a place to join our email list. That's how you can find out about our meetings and keep up to date with our activities. And another program that we run is the Space Communicator Program. It consists of giving 3 speeches and is open to everybody. Those 3 speeches are in each of these categories: a personal space speech that talks about your personal connection to space, a technical space speech where you explain some type of science or engineering concept to a general audience, and a community space speech where you really talk about us doing space together. And that's defined very broadly: government, business, education, history, and what have you. Once you complete these 3 space speeches, you get this trophy to commemorate that achievement. And the real goal of this is just to get you speaking in front of an audience, sharing your perspectives and the things that you've learned. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Bryn Lee, who's going to be given her personal space speech.
Okay. Say hi. Hello. Let's see. Okay. All right. Can you see her screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Great. Go ahead.
In the year 2011, July 8th, at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the shuttle Atlantis blasted off into space on a mission to the International Space Station. This was NASA's last official shuttle launch. People, including my family, stood next to other families of astronauts and NASA workers and watched in amazement as the shuttle blasted off into the deep darkness of space. We felt the rush of wind that traveled across Cape Canaveral from the blast. It was once in a lifetime experience. Unfortunately, I was only a year and a half old and I do not remember any of it. I do have pictures though. Hello, my name is Brindley Wright. I am 10 years old and the 4th out of 5 people in family. And I want to be an astronaut. I enjoy cooking, sewing, singing, acting, dancing, taking photos, and playing chess. I'm a secondary black belt in Taekwondo and have a business called Brinklins. I make and sell snow globes I sew. This is one of my little snow globes. While I don't remember the shuttle experience, the first time I became interested in space travel was 5 years ago when I attended a homeschool day at Johnson Space Center in Houston. There was a presentation about astronauts with views of space and Earth from the International Space Station. I was in awe at what I saw on the screen. I had never seen anything like that before. That day, I decided I wanted to explore the universe for myself. I want to be an astronaut because I want to answer all the questions that mankind has about space. Questions like, is there life on Mars? How are we going to live on Mars? And what happens to the oceans on Mars? I really never get bored of thinking about space, whether it is what is happening on the ISS, or how many days to get to Mars, or what astronauts wear and eat, or the new robots NASA is creating. I love it all. Part of my education in space has been visiting the Space Center. I was there on my birthday, meeting my favorite astronaut and family friend, Barry Wilmore, and seeing his photos that he took while on the ISS. I've taken robotics classes, participated in Starbase at Ellington Field, and watched the Dragon Group launch and work in the ISS. I also read everything I can get my hands on about space, and participated in the North Houston Space Society meetings. I enjoy these meetings because each time I attend one, I learn new things. These past 2 weeks, I attended a STEM camp by NASA and San Jacques Aerospace Program. In this camp, I learned a lot about the hazards of going to Mars and the new robots NASA is creating. We learned about how to grow food on Mars, and I studied hydroponics, created a solar-powered oven and a water filtration system, and built a robot. I love doing experiments. This year in school, I'm studying astronomy and will work on STEM and aerospace projects in 4-H. My short-term goal is to earn enough money to go to space camp in Huntsville, Alabama when I turn 12. That is less than 2 years away. I help my brother with his lawn service business and save birthday and Christmas money. My long-term goal is to dance on the moon or Mars. I'm so glad that they improved their spacesuits since the last moon mission. Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong checked all the time in their spacesuits. It would definitely be hard to dance in those. I hope to do that after my 10 years of astronaut training. I love space and hope to one day return to North Houston Space Society meeting to tell you all about my space travels on the ISS or with the Space Force. Thank you.
Thank you, Brinley. That was an amazing presentation, and we definitely look forward to having you come back and present all along your journey towards becoming an astronaut and afterwards. I think we probably have some people with some questions, but we'll save that towards the end. So we'll have you come back and answer those then. Greg, you ready to show us the space news?
I am. So that'll be a tough act to follow. Get this going, share the screen here. Okay, we'll get started here. This is the news since the last one of our meetings. It's dated August 1st. So it turns out since our last meeting, most of the large amount of the news recently has actually been focused on Mars. So I actually thought about some of the old bad movies. They didn't quite get it right. They thought that Mars is going to attack Earth. It turns out it's probably the other way around. So really, since the last meeting we had, 3 different missions to Mars have been launched from 3 very different countries. The United Arab Emirates, which will probably surprise almost everybody. China, which had really not said a whole lot about it until they did it. And of course, the United States with our entry. So I'll talk first about them. I'll do them in chronological order. The first one to go, in fact, was the one from the Emirates, United Arab Emirates. They're launching a Mars orbiter, so it's basically a car-sized object. It's going to just orbit Mars. It's not going to land. But it'll monitor the weather and the atmosphere in a lot of ways more thoroughly than anyone has done before. It's just modern instrumentation has moved along quite a bit. It's kind of an international project in that it's actually being launched from Japan, from a Japanese rocket. And they did it actually in collaboration with a lot of United States companies and universities in particular the University of Colorado. That's where they assembled it. It's about almost 3,000 pounds, about the size of a small car. And like all 3 of these journeys, takes about 200 days to get there. All 3 of them will be reaching Mars in February 2021. So we have this big flurry of activity right now. Now in February 2021, we'll come back and revisit all 3 of these. It's kind of interesting what they're doing. This is a very small country. I'm skipping ahead on the slide here, but you think about it. This is a country that has 9.2 million people, and in fact, only 1.4 million of them are citizens. So it's really a pretty small group. Obviously, they have a lot of money because they've had oil money going, but they want to diversify. They don't want to depend on oil and gas, or for that matter, on tourism. Dubai is part of the UAE, so they don't want to depend on that forever. They've actually outlined just in broad brush a 100-year program to get a city going on Mars. They probably can't be the only ones involved in it, but it's interesting that they are taking such a strong stand. On their overall space program, they probably spent something like 5.7 billion or something, but that's included, building up mission control is included, building satellites. They actually do have the capability to build some of them. They have several that they've launched and that are running right now. And an interesting project coming up is the Mars Science City. It's a little bit like Biosphere 2 for people who remember that, but it's really focused on building and experimenting with technologies that will be needed to live in a city on Mars. So for instance, they're imagining already lots of imaginative ideas on how it pretty much has to be underground because of the radiation. Maybe you put aquariums overhead so the light can get through but blocks the radiation. They've already put quite a bit of thought into it, and it'll be interesting to follow this. So small kingdom, and the word kingdom is literal. They, like some of those other small Middle Eastern countries, they're run by a king, but they are moving forward in the space world. The second mission to go was on July 23rd. That was from China. Long March 5 rockets, their biggest rocket. This is a bigger one. It's 11,000 pounds total for the orbiter and the lander. So they're splitting up. They have both an orbiter that will remain in orbit and a lander that goes down. As in the other case, it takes about 200 days to get there, so they'll be there in February. Their plan is different than any of the others. They're going to settle into an elliptical orbit. It'll take some time to establish that, but quite eccentric. It goes 165 miles at the closest point to Mars and 7,500 miles at the most distant point. They'll do this for 2 to 3 months, then they'll release their lander, and that has a 529-pound rover. So some of the press has commented that the U.S. is landing a car on Mars, and China's landing a golf cart. It's kind of just to keep the size in perspective there. And like the U.S. efforts, they do use a parachute, supersonic parachute as it works out, just because they're going pretty fast when you hit the Mars atmosphere. And then they have braking rockets to slow down for a landing. The Mars lander, this is an artist's conception down here of what it looks like. I'll point out a couple of things about it. It's run purely on solar power, so they of course have the solar panels here to collect that. They make a direct landing on the lander, which is on the right here. So as a result, you'll notice, of course, it seems obvious, but they have legs to land on, and they have a ramp for the rover itself to drive off of. That is actually different than the U.S. design, where it's actually dropped down from what they call a sky train, and they don't need to worry about feet for landing. So they're landing in an area called Utopia Planitia, if that's even a pronunciation. One reason is that radar indicates that there's a large ice reservoir there. It's turned out that previous rovers had discovered there's really quite a bit of water locked up in Mars, not just on the poles, but even under the ground. So one of the strategies for all the space programs has been follow the water, since we need that, and also you need it to manufacture rocket propellant for return trips. Now, this particular rover and the actually orbiter, this covers both, they're going to be analyzing a lot of things, including, for the rover, the soil and the rocks. They're going to be looking for buried water ice. They have a subsurface radar that penetrates the ground down to maybe 30 feet, actually the same as the U.S. is doing. But they'll also be studying the atmosphere and, of course, analyzing the internal structure with that radar. If they succeed at this, they'll be only the third country that actually managed to do a soft landing on Mars, and only the second to drive a rover. Obviously, we're the first. The Russians are the others that have managed a soft landing, although their one attempt didn't last very long. They landed, but then it died pretty quickly. In terms of Mars orbiters, also, I believe India put one up sometime. So there are very few countries that have actually managed to even get to Mars, and in particular, to get to the surface of Mars. And China, like the UAE back here, is actually doing this in one fell swoop. They haven't been there before. Neither had the UAE. Unlike the US, where we've been there quite a few times, we've dropped quite a few rovers in place. So this is the NASA, this is the launch of the NASA rover. Perseverance is the name of it. I think that was, that name was actually from a contest that NASA ran, as was the name of the helicopter which they're launching. I'll get to that. That was the latest one to go, just went July 30th. 314 million miles. They're going directly to the surface, unlike the others that are either just orbiting or going to orbit for a couple of months and then send something down. They're pretty much just going door to door here, taking off from Cape Kennedy and landing within 200 feet of their target. They've improved their ability to land. I'll get to that in a minute. Better than any of the other landers have been before. The total payload is about 9,000 pounds, just to help visualize that. Now, this goes up on a United Launch Alliance rocket. That's a combination of Lockheed and Boeing, kind of the traditional spacecraft vendors. It's an Atlas V rocket, Centaur upper stage. People that have followed the space program for a long time would probably recognize these. They've been used since the 60s, and pretty much the same. This one is called the 541 model. I found out that they're actually the 5, 4, and 1 have a specific meaning. The 5 means there's a 5-meter fairing. That's the diameter of the nose cone, which splits into to open up and send the payload off. It has 4 strap-on first-stage boosters. Those are solid rockets. And then 1 upper stage engine with an engine that's called the RL-10. All this is in addition to the main engine on the thing. Interestingly, that's actually built by Russians. So, you know, even our own space programs, it wasn't just the space station that was relying on Russian technology before. We've actually been using these, but they've been in use for a long time. That RL-10 engine that we do build, that's, you know, they've been doing minor enhancements over time, but pretty much is the same as we used back in 1963. So it's kind of interesting. We were using really, really old technology, you know, on these missions. But by the way, this really old technology is quite reliable. It actually, they never had a failure on the Atlas rockets, or maybe the Centaurs either, which is the upper stage. Those are the ones that have launched all those long-distance space probes. So this sort of the almost ancient-seeming technology, on the other hand, is capped with the most advanced robotic explorer that they'd launched yet. It's kind of an update on the Curiosity rover, which was launched in 2012. And that rover is still operating, by the way. So it's still running there. But this one has a lot more capabilities than that. It weighs a little bit more, maybe a few 100 pounds more. And you could think of this as being the next one of those. They spent total, counting all the launch costs and everything, maybe 2.7 billion over the last 10 years. So these projects take a long time to develop, and a lot of thought went into them. Sort of a combination of the old reliable technology with the new, more advanced robotics technologies. I showed this slide last time, but I'm going to fill in a little bit more detail. So the landing will happen on February 18th. They have a very specific date for that. And it all seems kind of complex, but there's really reasons for it. It starts off with as they go into the atmosphere, and of course there's a certain amount of aerobraking and a heat shield to take care of that. But there's not much atmosphere. But even at that, there's still enough that a parachute will help. So they're using a parachute, they call it a supersonic parachute, because the thing is actually going faster than sound when it's launched. That's put out at about 7 miles up. And it's used until it gets down to about 1.3 miles from the surface. At that point, it's going about 200 miles per hour. Now, the parachute deployment is actually very carefully timed. You know, one reason we say, well, they're going to land within 200 feet of where they're aiming for. That's not really all determined right as it leaves Earth, of course. You can think of this as feedback at the last minute. If they're a little bit off and, you know, it looks like they were overshooting, they'll deploy the parachute early or they'll deploy it late. So they have some control over where they land just based on the timing of that parachute. But the point is, that decision is made right at the instant, right about the time they're going to land. It's not made, you know, 6 months earlier. So anyway, the lander has thrusters turned on. It then will search for the exact landing site, and this is especially after the parachute is gone. It will hover at about 66 feet and then actually lower the rover. They call it a sky crane. And they've made a lot of improvements in this process. And having the ability to hover and to manipulate your exact position with the thrusters means that they can get the landing area down to within about 200 feet. And of course, all of this is automated. There's no way you could really do this under control from Earth. The 20-minute transmission delay each way is, of course, too long. So anyway, after the rover is dropped down to the surface, the sky crane shoots off in the distance. And there's several benefits to this. One, you'll notice there's no landing feet on the rover itself. They'll just put the wheels down and they're ready to go. There is not a lot of dust and dirt kicked up by the thrusters, which would be the case if you were doing a direct landing. So there's some advantages actually to the system, even though it seems a little bit Rube Goldberg-ish. Actually, and it works pretty well. This was done for the Curiosity rover. This actually is all, in this sense, proven technology. So this is a slide on one of the NASA sites showing also how they try to really carefully control where they're going. Once the parachute opens, there's pictures that are taken, you know, of seeing where they're going. And if they see that things aren't quite in the right place, they'll compare it to a map that was taken from when they were in orbit or previous orbital pictures, and then divert if necessary. This is all part of their scheme for getting there exactly where they want to go. Now the rover itself, 2,200 or so pounds, It's 10 feet long, 9 feet wide, 7 feet high. It's trying to help you visualize what this thing is. Again, it is car-sized, essentially. It's nuclear powered, and that may sound exotic. Actually, that's what was done with the last rover, Curiosity. In fact, it's been used for quite a few years. All those remote planetary missions, have gone out to Saturn and Jupiter and so on. They all have this. They have to, because there just isn't enough solar power when you get out further. You really need something like that. There's a lot of advantages to using nuclear power. One is, of course, you don't need to have solar cells. So if you look at this rover, there's no solar cells on it. They don't need it. Two, they can work at night. They don't have to worry about day versus night. Now, this is not a nuclear reactor, as such. It really is just a bunch of plutonium decaying. It decays about 2% per year. So this thing has they rate that for about a 15-year life. And the fact that they engineer these things to last so long is one of the reasons that they last so long. So that's why the Curiosity rover, for instance, is still moving around on the surface of Mars, still getting plenty of heat. That heat is used for warmth as well as generating electricity. So it's really just thermoelectric generation. One side note on that is that actually the Atlas Centaur combination is the only one that currently can launch these nuclear power plants. And the reason is simply they put out so much heat that it would end up frying everything. So what they have to do is essentially they have access, and at the very last minute, fairly shortly before they take off, they can put the plutonium in there, it's in a ceramic, so it's pretty safe. But they put it in there so it doesn't have time to heat things up too much until they launch. So that actually, and the only rockets that actually are set up to handle that right now are the Atlas Centaur combination. So the prime mission is to go 3 years. And they're landing in this place called the Jezero Crater. It was once flooded with water. It's a huge crater, and then there's also a lot of evidence that there was a river delta there. So they figure, well, there's a lot of clay soil there. They expect if there's any former life on Mars, they have a pretty good chance of picking up on it. So that is one of the main focuses of this particular rover, is to focus on not so much life now, but life that may have been in the past. And they have a lot of instruments to do that. Some of them are really quite new and exotic. For instance, spectroscopy, where you look at the spectra emitted by things, that's been around for a while. This particular one is a newer method. It's a laser one, and the nice thing about that is you can do it remotely within about 15 feet or so. You zap something, as you vaporize it, you look and you see what the spectrum looks like, and they can analyze from that. This is on a robot arm. So they have a lot of ability to get it where they want to go. They can look at rocks and take samples. So there's a lot of capabilities on this thing. They can drill. If you look, the robot arm is on the front of this thing, and it's a little hard to see, but I think these three things here are the drill bits. So when they put those down onto the ground, they can drill in a certain distance. They're going to be drilling and taking samples. And the idea is that they will then store them for some future mission. And of course, people might wonder, well, why don't they just do that in a future mission? Well, this way you have a sample of what happened right now before a whole lot of other rovers landed. Also, that way the future landers don't necessarily have to have those drills. So it's something they can do now. I don't think there's really a solid plan in place for really how they're going to get it back. But it's a general capability that they want to have, the ability to store the samples. Of course, they're going to monitor the weather and the dust, temperatures, and the pressures, and so on. The subsurface radar I'd already mentioned, looking at the geology. There are some concerns that when we bring people, we're going to bring much, much heavier equipment. We want to make sure that the ground won't just collapse under them. So that's part of it. And part of it's to look for water. An interesting test they're going to be doing is generating O2. And that's by pulling it out of the atmosphere. So the reaction for the chemists in the group here is take a couple of carbon dioxide molecules, you split it up into carbon monoxide and O2. Now, why do you want to do that? Well, oxygen, obviously, you need that for life, so for future manned missions, we want that. It's also useful for creating propellant. So if you typically have an oxidizing agent. Oxygen is pretty darn good as an oxidizing agent. You need that for rocket fuel, so that it's a component of rocket fuel. An interesting point is this is, I believe, the first in situ resource use of any spacecraft. In situ is, living off the land. That's what that really means. And it really will be essential to settling space, to even having a substantial presence there. You can't just take everything up from Earth. It just costs way too much. So we need to start. I mean, it's mining. In this case, it's you're not even mining. You're just pulling it out of the atmosphere. The atmosphere there is almost all CO2, so that was an obvious choice. We're also going to be testing some spacesuit samples just to see how they hold up. It's a little different environment than the moon. There's windstorms. There is an atmosphere, and it's quite different. This one will have a very large number of cameras, 23. You'll have great selfies that'll be coming back from Mars. Full color, very high definition, and also microphones, so we'll really be able to hear what's going on. So some of this, of course, you could say is sort of to help in the PR, but let's face it, that is important. Now, the interesting thing, of course, is that one of the first tasks as this rover lands, and first it'll run through a variety of power up and self-tests and so on, but one of the first things it'll do is to lay an egg, and that egg is the helicopter. The rover will drive off maybe 300 feet away and leave the helicopter behind. So the helicopter itself is a whole separate engineering task. It weighs about 4 pounds. It's 1.6 feet tall. Blades are 4 feet in diameter, so blades are pretty big. Yeah, that makes sense because, after all, the atmosphere is extremely thin there. It's about 1% the density of Earth. This is one place where they do use solar cells. What they do is they charge it up. They have lithium-ion batteries, just like your laptop computer. And by the way, there are lithium-ion batteries on the rover as well, so that when there are peak power demands that are needed beyond what can be supplied just through the current generation, they can pull out of the battery. So all those things that are in your laptops, yeah, they're up there on Mars too. So this thing, the blades, they actually have to spin a whole lot faster than on Earth because of that thin atmosphere again. So they're going like 2,400 to 2,900 RPM. They designed this for 30 days. Yeah, that's a design life. Now, design life can be misleading. The design life of a lot of the Mars rovers was 90 days, and of course, some of them lasted for years and years and years. But at least they want to make sure that they last that long. So there's really only 5 flights planned on this thing, and each one only lasts about 3 minutes. But the main point of this is simply to demonstrate that you can do it. Not just for Mars, but actually there's a plan to put a helicopter on Titan in one of the future flights. So this is a first use of a helicopter on another planet. And as a result, it's actually a pretty important test. Chances are it'll last a lot longer. Now, why would you want to have a helicopter? Well, it should be obvious. You can see much better. You can get places you can't get to. You could go down cliffs. You can go up mountains that you couldn't get to on the rover. You can come in close to them and look at them. You can look ahead for obstacles in the way that you might not be able to see from the rover itself. So it just seems like a natural extension, just like rovers, just like drones are here on Earth. Okay, now we've talked a little bit about the fact that we have 3 missions that have all launched in a very short period of time, 3 missions to Mars. Why is that? Well, we probably all heard the answer, well, there's a launch window. And everybody sort of probably has a rough idea of what that means, but I thought I'd really just make it a lot clearer here what that really means. So it starts off with thinking about you got the sun in the center of everything, and you have the Earth orbiting it. That's the solid circle here. This obviously is not a scale. And you have Mars orbiting. And of course, you have different rotational periods. Earth goes around the sun faster than Mars does. Now, what you want to do is, once you get off the surface of the Earth, you're actually orbiting the Earth. But at some point here, you want to get from one orbit to another. And so you're going from the Earth orbit, you're getting out to the Mars orbit. And how do you do that? Well, it turns out you create a different orbit. And why do we talk about orbits so much? Well, if you're designing space flights, you think a little differently than most people do. Usually, when you go from place A to place B, you think about straight lines. Maybe a line to get yourself to the airport, and then maybe one to an airport, and then some more driving or something. The space travel is really not like that. Everything is orbits. Unless you're escaping the sun, pretty much everything is an orbit. It's just that some orbits don't go all the way around. Second thing is, it's really mostly about coasting. You don't really run your rocket engines very much. The one exception to that is ion engines like large satellites use, where they have a very low thrust that's applied for long, long periods of time. But for every other chemical rocket that's out there, typically you have very high intensity bursts of energy, and then you just pretty much coast the rest of the way. So this dashed line here in this upper diagram, that's called a Hohmann transfer orbit. And as you might have guessed, it's invented by a guy named Walter Hohmann, German. Turns out that like a lot of other things that happen in space, actually this was really inspired by a science fiction book back in 1897. Somebody actually had a rough idea how to do that. This guy just figured out the mathematics of it, figured out how he could actually do it. And there's some assumptions about it, which are never fully met in practice. But a key one is that you have circular orbits. So Mars is in a circular orbit around Earth, around the sun, and Earth is in a circular orbit around the sun. Neither of these are exactly true, but they're reasonable approximations, and so usually a good starting point. The second thing is that in this case, Mars and Earth are also in the same orbital plane, meaning that if you think of these orbits mapping out a plane, they're pretty much in the same plane, and that also is approximately true. I mean, not 100%, but it's pretty darn close. It's just the way the solar system is built is that most of the planets pretty much operate in the same plane. So that's actually a pretty good set of assumptions. And you correct for it. You make mid-course corrections or in-course corrections as you need it. So the thing is all about how do you coast from one orbit to another? Well, that orbit, it's called the Hohmann transfer orbit. It's the dashed line here. So, of course, you don't really want to go in an orbit. What you want to do is you want to go from Earth, which we'll watch as this thing comes along here. It launches the satellite right at this point. It launches the satellite. It's going to go on a circular or elliptical orbit until it hits Mars. So what you said is, if you wanted to find this orbit, it has to touch the Earth's orbit, and it has to touch the Mars orbit. And it turns out that actually orbits generally are elliptical. The mathematics kind of prove that. So you're saying you want an ellipse that touches both orbits, and that's just a question of, okay, well, when do you launch it? So if you look at the ellipse itself, one of the focuses of that ellipse is the sun, and the other is actually a midpoint between the orbits of the two planets. So you launch when the Earth is closest to the sun in this orbit. That would be this point up here in the very top part of the diagram. And you do it in the same direction as the orbit. Now, this is for the case where you want to go from Earth out to Mars. And so I'm just following it out, and you want to hit it right there. So you're launching it to aim for a point where Mars will be when it gets there, with everybody following an elliptical orbit. So it arrives actually at the farthest point in this orbit. Again, the orbit is the elliptical one. And if everything goes right, you're captured by the Mars gravity, and you do what you're going to do from there. Now, what happens if you miss is that down here in this lower right diagram here, where same set of diagrams, you have the Earth orbit as a circle, and you have the Mars orbit as a circle. And here we launch, and oh, it missed. So now that's in that case, if you miss, you would see that in fact it is an orbit. It will come back around, and it will follow this dashed line. So as a spacecraft or a space engineer trying to figure out how to do these trajectories, yeah, you're thinking, instead of straight lines, you're just thinking ellipses, and you're hoping you don't take the whole orbit. Now this gets extended if you're doing the kind of things that the Voyager probes did. You go from planet to planet to planet, but each one of them has an orbit change of this sort. And typically what happens is you get to each planet and you make a correction, aim out for the next planet, because the gravity is just. So the main thing is just to have to launch at the right place, and the math isn't too difficult to do to figure out where that is. And that's why we have launch windows, though. In the case of Mars, it's about every 26 months where things are lined up just right. And I should comment on one additional thing, and that's that this is what I described is for going from Earth to Mars. In that case, you want to go in the same direction as your orbit, because you're trying to pick up speed to match here. Now, if you're coming from Mars back to Earth, you're still doing the same orbit. You just fire the rockets in the opposite direction. You want to go from the outer orbit back to the inner orbit, you fire the rockets in the opposite direction. So that's the story of the launch windows. There's a fancy name there, a Hohmann transfer orbit, which is named after a guy named Wolfgang Hohmann. Okay, other space news to get through really quickly here. Russia apparently tested a new anti-satellite weapon. We're not too thrilled about that. They'd actually had a satellite up there. It had launched a second satellite. And then from that second satellite, they actually launched at high speed. They shot something off at really high speed. And the only reason you do that is pretty much you're trying to shoot at something. Now, they purposely didn't hit anything, but they were obviously demonstrating the technology. Of course, now they denied it. It was pretty obvious to everyone that it wasn't an anti-satellite weapon. In other news, SpaceX did something that no one has done before. Yeah, as you know, SpaceX is into reusability. They try to capture the first stage, the whole first stage, including the boosters or whatever you use. But they weren't capturing the fairings. The fairings are the nose cones that hold the payloads, typically splitting in two. They caught them. They just caught them in a net, essentially. And that's a first. They caught both of them. In the past, they've recovered maybe one, and sometimes they pulled one out of the water. But salt water is not really good on metal, so you prefer them not to hit it. And these things are big. They're 43 feet high, 17 feet in diameter, and they cost about $6 million. And if you figure a launch cost is, say $50 to $100 million, say that's still a noticeable percentage of the cost. They didn't go for that first because the boosters cost more, but that was the next target, and they're doing it. How do they do it? Well, two things. They have a parachute on these fairings, and they're steerable. Well, that's a little different. So they can control where it goes. And then they have the recovery boats that just basically have nets mounted on them, and they go really fast. So once they figure out exactly where this thing's going to go, they just shoot out there as fast as they can, and they actually caught it. And this time they did it. And of course, in this particular mission, they had already landed the first stage as well on their drone ships. Separate news. The House had a budget bill which now freezes the NASA budget. Now these are negotiations. They've been going on all year. I'm not sure how much actual negotiating is happening, but as happens every year, the budget's up in turmoil, and there's some danger here. In fact, I'm hoping Jennifer can comment on this, because if they really freeze the budget, it would probably endanger the whole program of sending astronauts back to the moon by 2024. So I'll be interested to hear her take on the current state of wrangling in our government. Another recent news item, there's a rocket I hadn't even heard of before called the Minotaur 4. They launched some classified payloads for basically spy satellites. But what's interesting is that these rockets, they're 30 years old. They were sitting in missile silos for 10 years and then just stored separately somewhere else for another 20 or so. They were decommissioned from peacekeeper missiles from ages ago. These are solid fuel rocket motors and the fuel that goes with them all packaged together. Northrop Grumman pretty much just does a little bit of touch-up work on them, and they use them, and they still work. It's pretty impressive that this old technology really still works. Then there's the new technology. SpaceX, they have the full-size prototypes of their Starship, which is their biggest ship to come. They did a static firing test. The previous 4 tests all blew up. So I think if you've been following the news with us, you knew that already. This one actually did succeed. They didn't blow this one up. So that's a first. Fairly soon now, they should do the next test, which is a hop, meaning they go up 500 feet, move around a little bit, and land back. And this, of course, will be out of Texas, down there by Brownsville. So I think with that, we are ready to go to our next and typical thing. How many launches since the last meeting?
And I have that poll available, so maybe people could just answer in the poll real quick, and let's see what people select.
I guess we needed some really corny sounding music to play in the background.
Yeah, like something from Jeopardy.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking.
I won't try.
I can't remember how it goes, but yeah, that's what we need. I have to look that up.
Well, it looks like most people are less than 5, with a few higher. So I guess I'll go ahead and end the polling, and you could tell us maybe I should take a screenshot of the polling first. I'm not sure if it saves it. And I guess share the results. How about let's do that? Yes. So that's the current distribution. So I guess maybe I can stop that to end the poll. Okay, cool. So I guess what's the answer?
Okay, well, let's see. Let me get back the screen here. This is your screen or mine?
It should.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Oh,
We got it. Okay. So, well, here's the answer. Actually, it would be 8. And that's kind of impressive because the last meeting was July 11th, so this is really only a 3-week period. Now, I've already talked about most of these launches already. Ones we haven't talked about, the Russians launched a couple of communication satellites. We talked, of course, about the Perseverance. China launched some land survey satellites and a couple of others. The Russians launched a cargo delivery to the space station. These go on a pretty regular basis. Last month we had one from Japan, this month from Russia. They don't tend to get noticed, but they're all part of the business of space these days. We'd already talked about the Chinese Mars mission and the South Korean military satellite. These things are all so international, it's hard to really say what flags ought to be here. I've kind of gone just with who launched them because, I mean, really this is for South Korea, but it was built by Airbus, which is in France, and with some help from Lockheed Martin. So these things tend to be kind of international, except for the Chinese ones. They're mostly Chinese. Japan, of course, we're launching the United Arab Emirates one. I have a United Arab Emirates flag, but it got kind of crowded in trying to put that on here too. And then I already talked about that Minotaur 4. All right, on to the feature speaker. I'll give a quick intro here. Currently, she's a director of business development for ASTROBOTIC Technology, which is a company in Pittsburgh that focuses on robotics for space. And in particular, they've done a lot of work for the lunar payload developments, including NASA's Artemis program, which is planned to get humans back to the moon as soon as possible. In particular, that would be with the Human Landing System, often abbreviated HLS. In this case, she's working for the prime contractor, Dynetics. She's also on the advisory council of the Physics and Astronomy Department at Johns Hopkins University. In earlier jobs she's had, she's been a technical lead for commercial innovation and sponsored programs for the space station, including a lot of trying to use new technologies such as space manufacturing, AI, or other emerging technologies. She's also a founding member of the NASA Datanaut Corps, which I guess has sponsored some hackathons and things. I'm not too clear on what that is, but it sounded kind of interesting. A quote from her is, she's always striving to make space accessible to all, and we still have a lot of work to do. So her topics will be an overview of astrobotics, talking about lunar partnerships and the commercial lunar landscape. And at this point, turn it over to Jennifer.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And that was a great snapshot into all the latest and greatest of what's been happening in the space industry. So that was very informative. I think I'm going to have to start attending these meetings moving forward because I get a lot of latest news and information. That was fantastic. So well, thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Greg, for the introduction, and of course to all of you for having me join your meeting today. I'm excited to share the latest updates about Astrobotic, as Greg just mentioned, and I'm going to go ahead and present my slides. And because I was so inspired by Brinley's speech as well, or her presentation, I thought I threw in a couple photos in here for her. So I was going to pull those up so that you can see how I got interested in space. And Brinley is definitely way more advanced than I was at that age. It's so inspiring to see that. Let me see, I'm gonna share my screen now and I'll pull that up. Let's see, and I might stop my video in just a moment. Let's see here. You guys see my screen?
Yes.
Funny photo here. This is for Brinley. So I actually got interested in space. I've mentioned earlier on the call or in the meeting, I'm originally from San Antonio, from Texas, grew up in San Antonio, both at San Antonio and Austin. And the school that I went to is actually named, or my elementary school rather, was named after one of the astronauts from the Challenger shuttle mission in 1986. It was Commander Francis R. Scobie. So our whole school was branded NASA. It was branded space. Everything, from our mascot was an astronaut. You could see our motto, which is reaching for the stars. And this was one of my first science experiments at that school. I got really interested in space exploration, physics, science, computer science, technology, and yeah, so I was very proud of this this experiment. I won second place that year, but I wanted just to, like I said, I thought I would show you these photos for Brindley, because I thought that, like I said, I was so inspired to hear her presentation. And this is our first photo when the school opened after 1986, and there's Commander Francis R. Scobie. So yeah, it was such an inspiring point of where like I said, I became interested in space exploration and science and aerospace. And that really led me on the path to study science, study molecular biology, and go into space, and leads me to where I am today. So I'll go ahead and, this is another one of my photos when I was working at the space station. I was visiting Kennedy Space Center. And I'll start with the intro slide. Okay, great. And I think what I'm going to do, let me mention I'm going to stop my video so you guys can look at the slides instead of my video here. Okay, great. Okay, so again, I'm so excited to share the latest about Astrobotic. First, I'm going to provide an overview of our company, our programs and services, various technologies that we're working on, and some of the details on our upcoming missions and lunar partnerships. So Astrobotic is a lunar logistics and space robotics technology company. We're based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we're a 13-year-old company. And I was mentioning actually at the start of the meeting, we actually spun out of a group of robotics students and a robotics professor who co-founded our company from Carnegie Mellon University. And that was part of a Google Lunar X Prize competition. We saw that there was a business case, an interesting business model, and decided to spin out of that and created the company Astrobotic and built it into who we are today. So we've been in operation since, or over 13 years, or almost 13 years now, and have been able to procure over 30 or so NASA contracts. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So our mission and vision is to make the moon and to make space accessible to the world. And last year and just recently, we celebrated the 50th and 51st anniversaries of the moon landing and Apollo missions. And we're continuing to commemorate those historic moments. But we're also reminded of the fact that only 12 people have walked on the surface of the moon. And out of all of these missions and all of the billions of dollars we've spent, only roughly about 2 weeks in total on the lunar surface. And access to space, and more specifically access to the moon, has been very limited, mostly to governments or traditional aerospace companies. And we still have so much to learn and to build new opportunities. And that is what Astrobotic is out to accomplish, is to make the moon and to make space accessible to the world. And so this is why we like to start with the why the moon discussion, because it essentially motivates our services and products that Astrobotic offers. It also motivates exactly why we founded the company in the first place. And if you look here on the right, there's a variety of different applications and use cases that we think the moon can offer in the very near term. Of course, a lot of these won't particularly be surprising, but it's an important place to start to really set the stage for why we created our services. And as a lunar logistics company, we don't predict what the future use cases on the moon are likely to be, but rather we're very responsive to the demands and interests from our customer base. So really trying to create this end-to-end delivery services and logistics services on the lunar surface to be responsive to those demands that we're seeing in the consumer market, and trying to be responsive to the demands being articulated by those customers. So again, on the right, you see exploration and research, which is an obvious one, although I'll say that the moon is not the Apollo moon that it was in the 60s and 70s, since we've since discovered a variety of resources such as lava tubes and confirmed water ice, likely in various locations and in the permanently shadowed regions of the moon. And there are now a variety of things that we can understand about the moon that we didn't when we first embarked on those early missions to the lunar surface. So I'll say also a host of science exploration and various research objectives that we're excited to pursue. that really essentially makes this a new moon. So, and from an early, I would say early near term to medium near term perspective, there are potential opportunities to live off the land. We're taking these first steps, not just ASTROBOTIC, but the broader lunar community are taking those first steps to truly understand what ground truths that we can apply or with lunar resources, water ice, utilizing that water ice for the purposes of life support and potentially other applications such as propulsion or for other deep space exploration missions someday. So we're really excited to take those first steps, and we're seeing a demand from customers around the world who are interested in exploring those opportunities. And of course, at a broader level, the opportunity to demonstrate that we're a multiplanetary species. This is a distinct motivator for people to think as the first foothold in this new era of space exploration. And then on the left are more of the medium to long-term opportunities. So if we're able to determine that there's water ice that's accessible and can prove an economic business case that we can someday benefit from that, such as opportunities for fuel depots, or perhaps the opportunity for mining and utilization of resources for manufacturing that exists in situ, that the term that Greg was mentioning to the lunar environment. And then I would say, of course, we're not going to see these applications necessarily tomorrow or next year, but they are applications that we do think have strong viability in the future. And again, our customers are telling us that they want to explore these areas to get to the surface and start to see what's possible. So we created our services at ASTROBOTIC to respond to that demand that I just highlighted and to find new opportunities with non-traditional space customers as well. And we have this end-to-end delivery service that we provide for payload builders or payload builders around the world, and creating services that can meet a diverse, I'd say, diverse spectrum of technologies and demonstrations that are in some cases being built right now. So on the left, you'll see our lander product lines. These are the vehicles that we're looking to utilize across multiple missions by taking this shipping model approach to lunar delivery. So instead of designing a spacecraft that is built for one particular planetary mission and throwing that design away, almost similar to what we've been seeing with the Mars mission, where there was even a video I saw about Perseverance. If it ain't broke, or if it's not broken, don't fix it. They're modeling a similar design on the Curiosity mission. And so I'll say that we want to create a product line that can be utilized similarly over and over again, and of course further refined and modified, but for economic benefits, and to truly create that access to broader market. So trying to create a true end-to-end shipping service in space for the first time in some aspects. And the lander product line includes our Peregrine vehicle that you see on the left, which can carry up to 100 kilograms on the surface. Then we have our Griffin class medium lander that can carry about 500 kilograms to the lunar surface. And some of that, of course, is dependent on where those landers ultimately will go, and some reductions in payload capacity that's needed to accommodate certain destinations. But it gives you a rough sense, a rough estimate of capacity for those vehicles. And then on the right side, we have our rover product lines, which are an extension of our delivery services. So you can think of the lander services as that last mile of delivery, or that last mile of shipping. And our rovers are the last few feet of that delivery. And so customers and payload builders around the world have expressed an interest and desire to have mobility on the lunar surface. And they don't necessarily want to build their own rovers, but they could utilize the capability if we provide it to them as part of that end-to-end service. So again, it's really trying to be responsive to the customer interest and demand from around the world. And we built these product lines for rovers such as our Cube rover on the top right, which is a small product line which can carry about 5 kilograms or a modest amount of a payload, but in some cases that's all that's needed by those companies or space agencies, researchers, and scientists. And below Cube rover, you see our Polaris product line, which can carry about 90 kilograms of payload on board. And you can think of Polaris as similar to like a truck, where it's supposed to be very modular in design, with a payload bay and a variety of different functions, like carrying multiple instruments, for example, studying lunar regolith or lunar soil composition or types of surface demonstrations. And in addition to having these end-to-end delivery services, we're also, with a team at our company, we're thinking about the capabilities and technologies that are going to be needed for future missions, whether on the moon or other domains in space as well. So essentially, I like to position it as we're looking to build the technologies or the space technologies of tomorrow. From surface and subsurface robotic platforms for planetary exploration to GPS-denied precision localization to mission planning software, or our space station project with Bosch that's on the International Space Station right now. And that's leveraging deep audio analytics algorithms, really exciting space robotics project. We're basically we're delivering and looking at the cutting edge technology that pushes the envelope of the possible with space missions and of course for terrestrial or potentially Earth-based applications. So this is just a quick snapshot of some of the capabilities we're working on now and some of the types of capabilities that we're offering to the broader space community with precision landing that's gathering a lot of interest and in work right now. The need to get the landing ellipsis for our lunar delivery services to that 100-meter precision when we land on the surface of the moon is a big area of focus and a main area of expertise for that group in particular. And they've been flying on vertical takeoff and vertical landing vehicles for quite some time now. Where actually a few years ago, they flew on a Masten Space Systems lander and achieved the first visually guided landing for their terrain relative navigation sensor, which is a tech that we pride ourselves on and we consider to be one of our differentiators that we have as a company. And so in addition to the precision tech, the teams also focus on areas such as mission simulation, creating the maps and views of the lunar surface or some of the more challenging destinations on the moon in terms of lighting conditions, particularly at the poles, for instance. And there's also focus on autonomous navigation, perhaps going into a lunar lava tube, being able to use that navigation, and perhaps what you consider as sort of that ultimate GPS denied environment. Not that we have GPS on the moon, but in those environments, you're essentially on your own. And actually, we just publicly announced recently that ASTROBOTIC, our Future Missions and Technology team, was awarded a NASA SBIR Phase 2 contract to develop our UltraNav smart camera for next generation space missions. So UltraNav, just really quick, is a low cost autonomous visual navigation system for spacecraft. And the system has a wide range of applications, from the servicing of Earth satellites to journeys to challenging space destinations such as the lunar poles, or let's say going to mountains on Mars. And similar to computing demands here on Earth, we can always use faster, more robust, and more reliable computing systems and capabilities to get things done. So with a focus on space computing as well, we're looking at faster processing and commercial off-the-shelf like products when it comes to computing. So overall, we're looking at, like I said, the next generation of technologies and potential capabilities that we're going to be needing for our lander delivery services and for other missions as well. Okay, so switching gears a bit, that gives you a snapshot of ASTROBOTIC and our company at a top level. And now I wanted to talk a bit more about our manifest and our exciting upcoming missions. And these are the actual manifested missions that we have on the books and what we're planning and building now. So our first mission is with Peregrine, our Peregrine lunar lander, as you see here, and this vehicle will fly next year in 2021. The landing site will be at Lacus Mortis, which is located about approximately 45 degrees north and 25 degrees east, about mid-latitude on the moon. We're carrying a variety of different payloads and customers from around the world on this first mission. And we now have 16 customers on board from 6 countries. One of those customers is NASA, of course, through the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, or the NASA CLPS program. We're very excited to be one of the first CLPS vendors selected to deliver payloads for that program. And we're carrying payloads for NASA for the first time, really, and a lot of these instruments since Apollo 17 in 1972, where there haven't been any soft-landed payloads from the United States since then. So we're very humbled to be selected to do that and to be carrying those instruments for NASA. And the payloads that we're carrying in this mission manifest, many of them were already manifested before we were selected for the CLPS contract, which is also really a testament to what we're seeing in the commercial space development world and the lunar payload market, with actual sales and contracts in place before CLPS was even started by NASA. So it truly is a success story as we start to look at these new markets in space, in the space industry. And a few examples of these payloads I wanted to actually highlight a bit further. This is SpaceBit, which is a UK-based company, and they're sending the UK's first lunar rover to the surface of the moon, which is a pretty cool design, in my opinion, and very excited to see that. Also, a company in Japan called Diamond. Diamond will send their first lunar surface payload or lunar rover. And the Mexican Space Agency, AEM, they're on board this first mission with the technology demonstration payload that's being built by a university in Mexico City. So these are just a few great case studies that show a variety of different communities around the world that might not have the interest in building or have the capability of building a full lunar mission on their own, but they can still participate and be part of a lunar mission, leveraging the ASTROBOTIC shipping model, be part of missions like ours. And of course, it goes without saying, the historic aspects and the significance of our inaugural mission are incredible. As I mentioned, not only were we the first mission to go back to the surface of the moon since the Apollo era from 1972, but ASTROBOTIC's mission will be the first commercially led mission to go to any planetary body in the history of space exploration. And this really opens the door for new commercial partnerships, marketing, sponsorship opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have with a traditional NASA mission. And so we're partnering with brands and companies that bring that world-renowned experience and deep space exploration heritage, such as Airbus providing key hardware for our lunar lander. They're actually providing our landing legs, or Dynetics, our propulsion systems partner, to one of our commercial partners, our corporate commercial partners, DHL, the world's largest shipping company, who is our official logistics services provider. And as we know, DHL has played a pioneering role in shipping and logistics for many years, since they were founded in 1969, the year of Apollo 11. But their leadership, they're really hoping to further develop lunar logistics capabilities in the future. In parallel, they're also wanting to continue to be seen by their customers and by their stakeholders as a forward-thinking, innovative brand that's opening this new frontier in space. And DHL, through our partnership, they developed a payload program to promote their first mission called DHL Moonbox, which allows anyone in the world for very low cost to ship various items, artifacts, or keepsakes to the moon. And they're very excited to be a corporate sponsor and partner of ours. And if you are interested in finding out more information on Moonbox, of course, it's on our website. We have other very familiar Fortune 500 brands that are joining our upcoming missions, starting with our inaugural mission in 2021. And we're very excited to be announcing those partnerships soon, and really further highlighting the future of this commercialization in space. And these partnerships range from multimedia partnerships to branding, marketing campaigns, to technology demonstrations. And of course, it goes without saying that these commercial partnerships are critical and integral for opening the door to future opportunities for industry participation, especially with non-traditional space companies like a DHL and these missions that can ultimately, or we hope to maintain a sustainable marketplace. A few updates, or a few additional updates on the progress that we've made on Peregrine Mission 1 so far. So last year, after we announced our CLPS award with NASA, we signed with ULA, United Launch Alliance, for our first mission. Greg was mentioning them. We saw that they flew on Atlas with Perseverance. But we'll be flying on the Vulcan Centaur vehicle next year, and with the heritage and the partnership that the ULA brings, we're very excited to be flying on that mission. A few other updates here. The image on the upper left is our MMH MON 25 engine. We're incorporating this engine on our Peregrine lunar lander, and that engine has now been hot fire tested in a vacuum 60 times by our partner and supplier Frontier Aerospace. So we're really excited to get that on the test stand and get that operating, and we've made some incredible progress there on that front. We also see our structural test model on the lower left, which is a sneak preview of a press release that we're going to be sharing in the near future, which will have additional views of that structural test model. But that's also great to see hardware and actual, the structure of the spacecraft that's coming to life. And in the bottom right, you'll see our payload simulators that we're building. We're hoping to get these in the hands of our payload customers for them to test their payloads and ensure that the interfaces are going to be working as expected with their flight software. And then on the top right view, you'll see a sneak peek into our new lunar logistics headquarters that will be opening and coming online soon. I was mentioning this at the top of the meeting, that this is going to be opening, the building's gonna be opening very soon, the next couple weeks or a few weeks, but it's gonna be opening to the public within the next 6 to 8 months. And we're really thrilled to be bringing this online. It's gonna be a 35,000 square foot facility in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, which has the capacity to have 3 to 4 landers in development simultaneously, as well as a rover development and rover test pit areas. I'll just show you briefly. This is a closer view of that photo or that rendering. It's a view of our high bay and clean room. So the idea with this is that we're also going to be opening a space museum that will be located adjacent to the high bay for the public to be able to see our spacecraft actually being built. It's similar to when you go into JPL or when you go to JSC and you're walking in with the glass and you're looking into a clean room or looking into a high bay. We want to be able to provide that to the community and to the world. And our hope is to inspire the next generation of scientists, engineers, hopeful astronauts like Brindley, space business leaders to pursue STEM education, space careers, and of course to learn more about the moon, space robotics, and space exploration. And just quickly, this is a view into our lunar logistics headquarters to highlight this is going to be our ASTROBOTIC Mission Control Center and what it's anticipated to look like, also how we might react when we successfully land on the moon. Potentially might see a few of us on the floor though, I think, or myself. I'm actually on the right. So we pulled some of our staff together last year and put this photo together. But this really shows that we're creating an end-to-end headquarters with our Mission Control Center space, the spacecraft high bay, our payload room for our customers, electronics labs, testing facilities, offices. And then of course, this is the view just quickly to show what the outside or the front view of our building will look like with a designated lunar lander parking spot on the right. And entry point for lander and hardware delivery and shipping, which is where that's essentially a garage, so we can be able to get our hardware and get our spacecraft in and out. Okay, so back to our manifest and future delivery missions and what's next. Our second manifested mission we have on the books is a rover mission called Moonranger. So this is a rover that our planetary mobility division at the company is building, and they are putting this together as a test platform rover. And I'll say quickly that now Moonranger is not officially part of our product line that we offer to the broader market, but it's essentially a test platform to be able to test autonomy and moon rover operations for the first time. And this rover was selected under the LSITP, another acronym from NASA, or the Lunar Surface Instrument and Technology Payloads Program at NASA. It was selected as part of that program. It will be flying on another CLIPS vendor commercial lander. I mentioned Maston Space Systems earlier, and that'll be going in 2022. And although it will be, I would say after, once we safely land on the surface of the moon, then the rover mission, that becomes our opportunity to really provide those tasks and to conduct those autonomy tests. So we're very excited for that. And of course, I have to mention our latest and our third mission on the books now. We're very excited about this one. This was just announced in June, where ASTROBOTIC was selected to deliver NASA's Viper lunar rover via our Griffin lunar lander that you see here. And it's a very exciting lunar mission. Again, Griffin is a medium-class lander with flexible mounting options and rover ramps to accommodate a variety of rovers and other large payloads. And for anyone that's interested in the future of the moon and more broadly, the future of deep space exploration, Viper really offers an exciting potential in terms of findings that can have far-reaching benefits and impacts for space exploration in general. So Viper, which stands for, hopefully this video, yeah, okay, it should play in a loop here. This is just a simulation of the spacecraft and how the rover ramps will deploy. VIPER stands for Volatiles Investigation Polar Exploration Rover. It's a rover that's going to drive out on the surface of the moon. It will go into permanently shadowed regions and create the first resource maps tracking the distribution and concentration of water ice on the moon. And so essentially the ground truths that VIPER will seek is complementary, I would say, to the previous lunar missions, LCROSS in particular, that were initially determined, where they initially determined a presence of water ice at the south pole of the moon. And LCROSS, which stands for Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite. It operated, was a fast track companion mission to LRO, or the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. So the rover that will follow up, say the VIPER rover that's going to be following up to those missions, or to that mission LCROSS, will provide those first measurements and a first snapshot of how difficult it might be to extract water, whether it's subsurface or within the permanently shadowed regions. So there's a lot of interesting implications that these findings can have, not only for exploration, of course, if we can utilize the water ice for propulsion purposes or life support, some of those benefits I was mentioning earlier. But I think that they can have a really interesting implication for the future economics of space, and of course for the science relative to the science of the Earth-Moon system. So it'll be able to hopefully provide incredible insights on that front. So again, we're really humbled and honored to be delivering this rover on behalf of the VIPER team. We see this as a nationally important mission, and we're really excited to be carrying this to the South Pole, which will fly in 2023. So stay tuned for more developments on that front. And finally, I wanted to briefly mention, Greg mentioned this earlier in his Space News presentation, but this all falls under some of the payload services that we offer. So we recently announced our partnership with Dynetics to develop and lead payload integration services and payload sales for the Dynetics human landing system. This is under NASA's Artemis program to design and compete and build a system that will take the first woman and next man to the lunar surface by 2024, possibly, most likely later. But Dynetics was selected as one of the prime contractors, along with SpaceX and Blue Origin. And we are absolutely thrilled to set up this new sales offering on board the Dynetics human lander, bringing our payload expertise from our Peregrine and Griffin lunar lander programs. So that's very exciting and underway currently at the moment. And finally, I also wanted to just briefly close. As part of our payload services, we also offer a number of resources available for those that are thinking about flying or launching projects or launching payloads to the moon, whether if you're thinking about it with your own funding or working with a company or a nonprofit, a university, or another international space agency. If you're thinking about wanting to join our missions, we have a variety of resources that we can offer now to assist in that development, or at least just to give you some of the baseline information if you're curious and would like to know more. We have our payload materials, such as our payload users guide that's available on the website, and that's for both. We have a payload user guide available for both Peregrine and the Cube rover platforms. You don't see the Cube rover payload user guide here, but both are available on our website. And of course, for those that are willing to go under an NDA with us, we can share our more technical documentation, our interface definition document, which is a precursor to, of course, to the interface control document that we usually eventually sign with each payload customer that comes on board. And so you can find a lot more details about mission profile, environmental details, and interface technical aspects. And we also have a Peregrine deck CAD. So if you want to do a fit check, let's say, if you're curious whether your particular payloads ensure that they'll be able to integrate with our lunar landers, we have that available. And of course, we also have our payload managers to ensure our payload customers are represented on the lander side to ensure that those payloads and your payloads can be as successful as possible. So our services exist to make your space ambitions, your lunar ambitions, and visions on the moon a reality, and ultimately to make the moon and make space more accessible to the world. And with that, I welcome any questions, and thanks again.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Let me go ahead and allow people to unmute themselves. So I guess first off, does anybody have any questions for Jennifer?
Yeah, I have a simple question. You know, I view going into space a human endeavor. This is human civilization moving out of our womb, you know, into an incredible uh, universe of which we know very little, actually. And so to me, it's very important in thinking about this as something for mankind that working with China and Russia is a very important part of the agenda. And it's exactly this kind of project that can bring nations together around a sense of common destiny, as Xi Jinping likes to put it. Mm-hmm. So I was looking at the list of companies that you're working with or projects you've got going on. And I don't think I saw the whole thing, but I was wondering if there has been any communication between Astrobotics and Russian Space Agency or the Chinese or whatever.
Well, first of all, thank you. I agree. I think it's a collective endeavor, and I think any steps that are taken, you know, we're all, you know, shooting for the same goal or trying to go into the same direction. More specifically, the one I'll also briefly say that with our inaugural mission next year, you know, again, as I was highlighting with a lot of the participation from some of these nations and countries around the world, that's something that really struck me when I first started working with ASTROBOTIC, just to see that international, that global participation, that we're offering an opportunity for countries that never thought that they would have had the ability to be able to participate in space before. Now they have a pathway, they have an ability to be able to do that. And so that's something that, you know, also goes back to the broader vision, the mission of what we're looking to accomplish as a company to make space accessible for all, and to make the moon accessible to all. And so in particular, when it comes to Russia and China, I would say historically we haven't worked specifically with them yet. And that doesn't mean that we're not open to exploring a potential collaboration or exploring anything in the future. But so far we haven't been able to work specifically on let's say a particular payload or an upcoming launch just yet. But again, that you never know, that might change. So so we're definitely open to that. But it's also interesting to see a lot of those developments, what's happening across the landscape, or across the lunar industry, with even with China's missions that are on the moon now, when we're seeing a lot of the developments at their lander on the far side and what they've been able to accomplish in such a short period of time. So it's been really interesting and exciting to see. But yeah, I think it's something we're definitely open to.
Sounds good.
Jennifer, I had a question about your DHL moon, excuse me, moon box.
Yeah.
I was thinking about sending some digital things, and I was wondering, is there any hope of like a micro SD card actually surviving the lunar environment, or is there a recommendation you had of some way to send a digital something or another?
Yeah, I think that with the Moonbox program, they have a particular container that is included. So it's a very, you know, small or particular dimension in terms of volume and form factor that whatever object has to fit. And so certainly, you know, if you're curious, you want to know more, if you want to see if, you know, there's a possibility to send something like that. And then of course there are, you know, specifications, requirements. You know, if you're sending something that could, that has a particular material or chemical, or that could impact, you know, from a packing perspective, there's any possibilities that there's a risk there to the spacecraft. But I would certainly say that we can look into it. That's something that we can see. I know Actually, I was mentioning this just yesterday, even on the Perseverance mission, how a number of, I think it was over 10 million people were able to send, they signed up for a boarding pass and were able to put, NASA, JPL, put all of those names onto a miniature or sort of chip, and then they're able to launch that on the rover. And so I think it'd be exciting to be able to look into those opportunities. And it could be, opportunities for DHL as we're seeing the interest from them to expand that into the future to other types of items or objects to be able to send. So, but certainly I'm happy to follow up with you and to see if that's possible.
Awesome. Anybody else have a
Jennifer,
question?
what kind of pricing are they going to have?
It's actually pretty reasonable. I think they're, they're less than like $500 to send it depends on what you're sending. I think that then the price increases, but it's not, it's not too bad. I mean, if you pull together a group of people and, everybody chips in 10, 20 bucks or 50 bucks. And so it's pretty reasonable in that sense. So that's really what DHL wanted to create, was to be able to have a low cost, affordable, a new opportunity for the public to be able to participate in space in that way. So, and we only have a few reservations left. I should also note that because the manifest is going to be closing pretty soon, within the next couple months or a few months. So if you are interested, I recommend you take a look at the website, or if you just Google DHL Moonbox ASTROBOTIC, and you can find the link, or I can put it in the chat here in a moment, and you can take a look and see if it's something y'all are interested in.
Yeah, I've seen the DHL Moonbox website. It's pretty neat how you have the configurator to choose the size.
Exactly. I love that feature too. It's great.
And if I remember right, for like approximately a quarter size object was about $450. So
okay, so yes, I was gonna say I know it's less than $500, but and for some folks, it's you only need a little in terms of the container. You need just a small little amount of room or volume. So
and the interesting thing is they don't charge for weight. So if it fits, it ships.
Exactly. Exactly. No, that's a great program. We're very excited about that. There's actually, I believe, one. I'm trying to remember if it's going in one of our moon boxes or if it's going in a separate container. But I believe there was a school that put together a quilt. It was like a paper, some quilt, but it was very tiny, very small. In terms of all of the different pieces, and so it's just been really interesting and inspiring to see all the different ideas and concepts that people would like to send.
Hey Jennifer, I have a question. With
Sure.
ASTROBOTIC, have you partnered up with any companies to look into, as far as your rovers, doing like drilling to get soil samples and do any type of like really micro biology, like genetic sequencing to see?
Sure. Yeah,
those like DNA is related, to the
No, that's a great question. I'll first answer on the hardware front. We are working with a number of companies that have those capabilities, because our our strength is to build and to create this, the platform that for Key Rover, and our team is really focused on creating that platform in a number of different sizes for customers, or depending on what they're interested in, or what they would like to send, or what types of demonstrations or science that they would like to conduct. And so part of what we're looking at is to enable with some of those technologies to see, how could we get that even, in addition to the mobility, but then to add the instrumentation and some of the tools to really start to look at some of those other capabilities, or some of those other areas that we could make, these platforms even that much more accessible or capable for different customers. If it's from scientists or PIs that would like to get some of that information to study the surface. And so there are companies out there now that are actually focused on, I'm sure you probably heard of Honeybee Robotics. Maxar also focuses on robotic arm technology. And the drill that is going to be included on the Viper rover will also have a drilling technology. So you could probably, if you look up just to Google online, the Viper mission with NASA, and there's a lot of information as to that particular part of the mission, or that particular part of the demonstration, or that technology demonstration, to be able to test and sample the surface, the lunar surface or subsurface of the moon. In addition, we're also looking at, when you asked about the microbiology or the life sciences piece, we are in conversations with a number of companies that are interested in testing on that side too. So I would say it's still open as far as that sort of landscape or that playing field, but we certainly need to be looking at that area as well, as we've seen the benefits that can have studying or leveraging a unique environment like the microgravity environment, for instance, on the International Space Station. What are some of those things that we could leverage, and as we're seeing this new sort of or different phenomena that we experience then versus on Earth, and what are those differences that can have on our science, our research, and so how can we leverage a lunar environment in a similar way and provide those opportunities for different companies or universities or other entities that are interested in studying those areas. So it's definitely an area that we're seeing interest. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would highly recommend either reaching out, or if you're part of a team that wants to explore that. That's still, there's definitely a big area there. A lot of people are excited to explore that.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the ways to grow microorganisms, because usually it's gravity, just boom, and it's just layered on top of each other. But with no gravity, it's you could build vertically, to get those ecosystems built. So that's interesting. That's really cool.
And we're seeing a lot of that on the International Space Station as well. There's experiments and investigations that actually that are happening now, where they're trying to see if they could mimic that type of research, but leveraging a microgravity environment. And what are those differences? How could you, in terms of the potential form factor that could be built based on that unique environment. So exactly, it's definitely an area I'm personally very, very interested in. I first studied molecular biology when I was at the University of Texas. So I'm in particular, exactly, yes, go UT. Very interested in. I'm very interested in that area. So that's a great
Sweet. Well, thank you for the insight. That's awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Will your craft be able to survive the lunar night?
The multi-million-dollar question. This question is definitely, this area rather, is definitely a hot topic in the lunar community. As you can imagine, it's definitely something that we're trying to push for. So our first mission is not intended to survive the lunar night. It's once we get to that point, we're trying to maximize the daytime, and then that's the end of the mission. But there are technologies that are being looked at now, and there's also technologies that are being supported by NASA, different demonstrations to try to provide solutions for that. And once we figure that out, I think it's going to open, of course, a whole new area for us or for future missions. So not quite yet. We're not developing that, but we're seeing a lot that's happening in that area. So
I was wondering if you had any insight into how the Viper rover would be able to operate in these permanently shadowed areas, which would seem to me would be more extreme than even the lunar night would be.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're right. And I in particular, because I don't necessarily know all the specifics or the technical aspects of the rover itself, the sort of the ConOps, and I think there's some information about it online. And some of the things that I've been seeing from from okay, not just from the Viper team, but from some of those teams that are the scientists and researchers from academia that are helping to put together different aspects of that mission. I think that they're still looking at what is that, that mission profile going to look like? What are the areas that they're going to focus on? If we're going to be, obviously the destination will be South Pole, but then exactly what that landing site is going to look like, where will that be located near? Also, in addition, the distance that Viper will travel. And I've been seeing some information about even the type of, when they traverse across the surface of the moon, the formation that they're going to traverse, if it's like a sort of a squiggly line, or what is that cross section going to look like once they've covered a certain map or certain area on the surface. And so all that to say, I don't have the technical answers to give you, at least right this moment. I actually would love to know more about that myself. I think we're still learning. We're still trying to figure that out. But there might be some preliminary data or some preliminary information as to why or how they're planning on approaching that, or what those potential solutions might be for the permanently shadowed regions. Again, because based on what I just said about not being able to survive the lunar night, I was also curious about those plans, or how they're going to attempt to try. There's some thermal aspects, or I think it'll be interesting to see.
Any plans for some type of return mission from the moon, like sometime out in the far future?
Sure, that's a great question. And that's something I personally would love to see, and actually a lot of customers are already asking. We're seeing that interest from payload builders, from, of course, different customers that's ranging from space agencies to commercial companies, academia. So our first missions are not going to provide sample return. I'll say though that the idea is to eventually to be able to provide that, if that is from a robotic mission, we have a robotic return, or of course, looking to that from the human landing side, the human landing system side. So inevitably there will be sample return. It's just a matter of when, not if. But yeah, but of course with our first missions, because we have a particular sharp focus on accomplishing with some of our payloads, and of course the nature of the mission itself, because we're just focused on being able to have a successful mission after the U.S. has not been back for almost 50 years, or a little bit more than 50 years, and then eventually to try to be able to provide that capability. So absolutely, I would say to stay tuned on that. We'll definitely see that hopefully near sooner versus later. So
awesome. And I see Hunter has his hand up. Hunter?
Thank you, Nathan. You actually asked one of my two questions about capabilities for return missions. And pardon me, my 15-month-old daughter has some comments too.
She's excited.
Yes. But my second question, so I'm a geophysicist and also a graduate student at the Colorado School of Mines in their space research program.
So George Sowers?
Oh, yes. I took, yeah. Really enjoying the program, and just in line with that, I was wondering if you guys are considering any of the follow on to the logistics of in situ resource utilization, either as a customer for refueling in the future, or would you see yourself in like providing fuel for some of your clients, refueling for returns or something like that?
No, that's a great question. I think initially we would like to be able to provide, because it falls in line with our delivery services, sticking to our shipping model. Hi. Oh, so cute. Hello. And then seeing how we could provide those lunar logistics in terms of the that repeatability and being able to provide that foundation there. But certainly we're interested, and we're working with partners, working with other companies that are also looking at that area as well. And I think collectively we're all trying to build the foundation with some of these initial missions. You know, again, our missions with the demonstrations or various technology demonstrations, the research, they're really the tip of the spear. It's going to be, you know, the precursor for those next steps to be able to provide the foundation for those capabilities in the future. And so we're part of that community of different providers. So whether it's us working together with one of those companies or providers or partners, I think certainly that's most likely the area that we'd go into. So, but I'm seeing a lot of movement on that front to be able to, like I said, to provide that initial foundation for or as a precursor for that area. So, and in situ resource utilization is definitely at the top of the list. Every meeting, conversation, conference, or you know, presentation that I'm seeing, that's definitely a main area of focus to really drive that. So, absolutely.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And I see we have a couple more hands up. Barbara, what was your question?
With all the economic and political turmoil around this COVID problem, do you see a pullback in funding and even the will to look at space issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know it's been an interesting few months, hasn't it? It's been really fascinating to see just, you know, on multiple levels how things have been progressing, and then of course even just to see Greg's presentation on the latest updates in terms of space news and what's happening around the world. I would say I think there's always, at a broader level, there's always going to be a push for you know, trying to move, you know, what's next, or to make sure that we're moving multiple things in parallel, including space exploration and including some of these missions. You know, I think people forget that these missions, it's not just the, you know, the space aspect, and it's exciting and cool, but I mean, these are jobs, you know, these are families, these are people that are working on these missions, that have been working on these missions sometimes for decades. And so I think that there's, you know, that aspect, I don't see that necessarily going away. But that being said, you know, the landscape is definitely shifting. We're seeing, you know, how we're trying to adjust and acclimate to the new environment. And we're certainly doing that, at least from an astrobotic perspective, you know, making sure that we're taking care of employees and being aware of the landscape and what's happening. But at least from what I understand in terms of the program from astrobotic standpoint, with CLIPS in particular, I mentioned CLIPS before, the Commercial Lunar Payload Services program. Those funds are most likely, you know, from what I understand, are intact. However, you know, and Greg mentioned this earlier about the potential risk with future human missions or Artemis. You know, that's something I think we'll have to see how it goes over the coming months, in a few months, or in the near term, and then of course see how those funds get allocated. But yeah, I mean, I think it would be a shame to not, you know, to be able to at least allocate a certain amount of budget to push our species forward, to push humanity forward, and at the same time to be able to take care of us here on Earth. You know, there's usually when I give presentations to students, at the beginning of all of my presentations, I always start with the question of, you know, the sort of the skeptics, you know, when folks may ask you, why do you study space, or what's so important about studying space? And I try to at least encourage the students and the kids to be able to say, you know, that space exploration is, you know, can provide some of those solutions, or provide those resources for us here on Earth. There's so many things we need to learn. So it's a little bit more of a visionary answer, but but hopefully at least that gives you a little bit more of a perspective, at least from where I sit, where I stand on that.
Well, you know, those of us who were doing this in the 60s and 70s remember when Nixon killed the Apollo program. And it was,
Mhm.
you know, it wasn't financial. It really was political crap.
Yeah.
And we sort of see the same thing happening now. Whose program is this? Well, if it's the other party's, too bad, so sad.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's something I've been seeing even when I was working with the space station, the space station, the ISS National Lab. That was interesting to see how things shifted over the years because it's controlled, you know, on the Hill, controlled by Congress, and that's something that, you know, one, you know, it's unfortunate that that's the framework that we're operating in, you know, because it's sort of contingent on, you know, who's the dominating factor there. So until that gets resolved in some way, I think we're gonna have to figure out how to manage that. But yeah, it's definitely an ongoing path for us collectively, I think, throughout the space industry. So we'll see.
Do
Yeah,
you
I think
see it ever becoming commercially viable that the private sector can just do it without government deep pockets?
Yeah, well, actually, and that's a great question. I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because, you know, one of the things that we're noticing, even when we made the announcement of our Viper mission with NASA in 2023, we've been seeing a lot of interest from different countries, or different nations, different space agencies, technology or innovation groups with, you know, in these nations, as well as commercial companies or private companies, where they're willing to you know, put in the funding, and then it's a matter of obviously working out the logistics from a transportation aspect, you know, working with the launch providers, and of course, coordinating with them to maintain those costs and try to keep certain costs down. But otherwise, we are seeing, at least, and I'm speaking about this from the commercial, or sorry, the commercial lunar standpoint, and of course, seeing a lot of investments happening throughout the rest of the space community, if it's with you know, the small sat side, or so I think eventually, you know, we're still in early stages, and, you know, still sort of in the nascent period, but I think eventually there will be a, you know, a sort of a crux in that we're going to start to see that converge, or see that go into more of the private side. So just still obviously, you know, largely dependent on the government right now. I mean, even SpaceX is a perfect example of that. SpaceX would not be where they are without the help that they had from NASA, and of course other subsidies or investments from the government. So hopefully, I would say hopefully soon, but we are seeing a shift. So that's exciting.
it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. You know, there's no commercial interest in the moon because there's no commercial capability in the moon, and, you know, it's kind of like maybe we'll see a change there.
Yeah.
I see, Peter, you have your hand up. You have another question?
Yeah, well, I have a comment and I have a question. The comment refers to this idea about whether we're going to keep it up. Is one party going to shut it down, another? I think that the real issue there is what your view of man is, because is an exploratory, creative, an inspired force in the universe, and you think of them that way, then that's optimistic. That's going to breed the optimism that's required to take on these challenges. And then you have the pessimists who think man is a poison on the planet. We've destroyed everything we touch, we destroy, we upset it, we, you know, make a mess out of it. And there's too many people and we should get rid of a lot of people. Those are the pessimists. And we have to get back to our, you know, this I think the real, you know, driving idea of the United States was, we're optimists. We're going to build something. We're going to make things better. So that's what I like to think. And then the question is, you were talking about surviving the lunar night. Now, this may be a typical kind of question that comes up, but does that mean being able to operate throughout the lunar night, or simply being able to survive it so that you can continue to operate in the day? And has the question of small nuclear nuclear reactors, which I believe are contained in the Perseverance.
Mhm.
Do you see a future for that kind of thing to surviving the lunar night? I guess I'm just not really clear about what element of the lunar night is at issue.
Sure. No, that's a great question. Thank you for that. I agree. Thank you for that comment as well. I would say it's a bit of both in terms of surviving the lunar night. I would say it's more, at least initially, on the latter, that we could be able to keep the hardware, keep these platforms, or keep these technologies in a viable condition to then be able to operate and continue operations or surface operations. And then eventually to be able to then continue surface operations during the lunar night as well. But because the temperatures plunge, the environment is so extreme, during that period, it's really trying to conserve the power, trying to say, okay, how could we, and basically survive to then be able to then continue operations or ongoing surface operations thereafter. And I agree. I think the technologies that we're seeing with Perseverance, with that mission, Mars 2020, that we're starting to see some demonstrations there. So that's pretty promising. I think, and we're looking at some of those things, at least on the lunar front as well. And there's, like I said, there's other technologies that are being considered, or potential solutions that different scientists or PIs are trying to attempt in terms of a test, or to see if we could use these potential solutions to help in that area. So again, once that's figured out, it's going to be a game changer. So
great. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So last year, there were 3 attempts to land on the moon, one by the Chinese. They were successful with their rover, and it's been able to operate multiple lunar nights, survive the lunar nights, to operate during the day. Any idea on how they're doing it?
Oh, that's a great question. We would like to know actually a lot of things that they're doing with their lander, or Chang'e 4, for instance. Even just as an example, we're curious about some of their camera systems that they were using on the lander. So in terms of actual specific technical details, I'm not quite sure. I would have to talk to my colleagues or talk to my technical team and find out and see if they have any intel on that front, and then I can share that with you guys. Because that was one of the things that I was curious too, is just to see that with these long duration missions, or how they're able to withstand and to be able to continue surface operations. So but yeah, I don't have the immediate answer. I apologize, but I'm happy to get the details or the technical intel, and I can report back.
And last year, there were 2 attempts to land on the moon that didn't go so well. The Israeli attempt and the Indian attempt. I was wondering, have y'all kind of coordinated with those teams to kind of review what went wrong with theirs, and just making sure there's some lessons to apply to y'all's project, to make sure that it doesn't have the, that avoids those issues?
No, that's a great question. I don't believe that we're coordinating directly with those teams, but we are taking into account the reports, or what we've been able to learn in terms of potential anomalies, or any potential failures or mishaps, and then be able to cross-check with our plans and see if there's anything that we could try to avoid, or take those lessons learned, those best practices, and of course not only that, but then take all of the the history, I would say, that the heritage of other lunar missions that have occurred since the first lunar missions, going back decades. So taking all of that historical data as well. What was interesting, I don't know if y'all have taken a moment to do this or not, but if you look at on Wikipedia, there's the Wikipedia page that shows all of the successful say the lunar attempts, lunar landings. So all the successful missions, all of the failures, it's organized pretty nicely. So you see this sort of chronological, this historical chain of events of when these missions happened. And next to those missions, in terms of the timing, you also see the potential failures, or what those anomalies were, or why they weren't successful. And so you see the attempts, by different countries, that there were multiple attempts made before there was a successful mission. But I think it's a combination of being able to take that information, in addition to, the teams that we have, the partners that we've been able to pull together to ensure that we could de-risk and to try to create as little as in terms of that potentiality, that percentage of risk of failure as much as possible to ensure a pretty substantial success rate for us, for our partners, for NASA. And so that's at least the approach, one of the approaches that we've taken. But it's been very interesting to see what's happened with those missions. And it was exciting. It was great to at least see that their attempts, and they're going to continue to push forward and to go back.
Oh, we're almost at 4 o'clock. I just wonder if I could convince everybody to turn on their webcam so I could take a little picture of the group. Hunter, Barbara, Ken, Quentin, and
Sorry, don't have one.
okay. Everybody smile. 1, 2, 3. Cool. And maybe we should open up for questions real quick for anybody that has a question for Greg or Brindley. Oh, go ahead, Vito. You're on mute still. Can't hear you. Oh.
I would like to know if now that private ventures are intervening actively in space development along with the NASA, has there already in place any regulation in order to split the activities that could be considered non-essential from others that are strategic in order to protect the core technology of this industry? And question number 2, has ASTROBOTIC already facing some sort of competition from someone else who had decided that this is a good idea?
So your question was the first part about regulation. So I guess the Commercial Payload Lunar Services program. Jennifer, can you talk a little bit about maybe the kind of like how NASA is I mean, I know there's 15 companies that have competed and been selected to be part of the CLPS program. They're bidding for like 2 work orders every year for like the next few years. But could you talk a little bit about kind of the broader program that CLPS and the LSIPP are?
Yeah, sure. And I apologize because I didn't answer right away because I was trying to understand the part of the question. I think it's just to make sure also looking at, I think he was talking about regulation, but feel free to jump in or tell me if I'm going in a different direction.
Well, yeah, the question relates to the fact that some activities relating to all this rocket science could be considered strategic, for example, for the US government, and cannot give to private parties like other entrepreneurs. So is there a regular participation in some sort of
Sure.
activities?
Sure. Okay. No, I'm sorry about that. Okay. So yeah, or at least in particular, Nathan, to your point with the Commercial Lunar Payload Services program, or CLPS, the way that program was developed was one, of course, to set the foundation for public-private partnerships. To try to set the foundation for companies like ours or for other players to be able to participate in this program, and that would also enable other collaborations or other types of partnerships as well. And then, of course, as the program was getting, it became more established. And to Nathan's point, initially we had a group or sort of a cadre of different vendors or CLIPS vendors. So ASTROBOTIC is one vendor, and there's other companies that are a part of that community that were selected to be the official CLIPS providers. And then that it was expanded. There was an addendum that happened where NASA then added, I believe it was 4 or 5 other companies to be part of that community. And those companies include Blue Origin and some of the SpaceX. And so basically it's meant to, like I said, to try to foster this commercial or public-private partnership participation. And then in addition to that, there are a number of other, I would say requirements or different things that these companies have to that we all have to be able to fulfill. And part of that is, let's say that with our spacecraft, for instance, building with the hardware, the components, that the companies that provide those components have to be, that there has to be a certain percentage more of, or let's say 60, 70%, I'm just saying a number, I don't know exactly what it is. But let's say that those components of that hardware has to be manufactured in the United States, or our companies have to be United States-based companies. So unfortunately, you couldn't have a company, in another country that wants to be part of the CLIPS program. But really, the reason for that is not to eliminate, other participants. It's really to drive and foster innovation, to foster, like I said, these public-private partnerships for lunar exploration here in the U.S., and to really help the companies in our backyard. And yes, it may seem a little disparate, or may seem, because it's companies like ours going up against a Lockheed Martin or a Blue Origin or SpaceX, that has, pretty substantial revenue or market cap. But it's a testament, because we just won the Viper task order, the Viper mission, and we went up against SpaceX and Blue Origin and Lockheed Martin. So it was definitely a David and Goliath situation. We beat them out. We beat them out on the technical aspect, and we beat them overall in terms of our what we were proposing for the mission. So sorry, I know we're up at the end of the hour, but I wanted to at least give you a little bit of context there. And then the other question, did I answer that, or I think there was a second question about ASTROBOTIC, correct? Or did I answer that one as well?
Yeah, the other one is whether your company is already facing some competition for someone who thinks that this is a good idea.
Yes. Sorry, yes. So the answer is yes. We have a number of different companies that are providing that competition for ASTROBOTIC. I would say that the differentiating factor among a number of things, but for one is, how, as far as the timing, how early we got started on our mission. I mentioned that at the beginning of my presentation when I was showing you the payload manifest. And a lot of these payloads that we have that are part of our inaugural mission launching next year, we have signed with them, we have contracts with them, we have sales with them that started years before or in advance, prior to when the CLIPS program was getting started and was becoming established. So again, that really shows, that we've been through the early player to start to try to bring this opportunity together. And I think that really gives us an edge, in addition to our approach with our end-to-end services, or our platforms, our products, and everything that we're providing as a company. I think that also really sets us apart. I'm seeing a difference between ASTROBOTIC and other companies, although there is still competition out there. So, and everybody's trying to achieve similar goals. So, but it's good. Competition is good.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh, also, William, I hate to put you on the spot, but I know you're down there working on creating a NSS chapter in South Texas. Did you want to maybe talk a little bit about your efforts there?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is William Brown. As Nathan said, I'm here in South Texas. I live in Brownsville. And so right now we're currently in the works of creating a NSS chapter, the NSS South Texas chapter. And for those of you who don't know, Brownsville is the newest site for SpaceX. And so they're doing a lot of their testing here. And a lot of the people here in the community are very excited. But there's also a lot of opportunity here to inform the public about all the developments in the space program that have happened and that are currently happening. And so, you know, our main goal here is to help teach everybody about, you know, everything that's happening and try to show them like, hey, anyone can be a part of this. And so show them the different opportunities that there are. So we're really excited to get involved with this and work with other chapters as well. And I'm very thankful that, you know, the North Houston chapter has invited us to attend the meetings and, you know, work with us.
Yeah, and
And
oh, go ahead.
And maybe a great opportunity to introduce STEM to some areas that sometimes don't get the sort of quality STEM that we'd like them to have.
Definitely, yeah. There's a lot of people here who are very interested in STEM, but because now we're starting to see a lot of development, there's lots of years where there was some development, not so much, and so a lot of people thought, wow, in order to make it big in the STEM field, we'd have to move to Houston or to some other big area. And so now that there's a lot of stuff happening here, especially with SpaceX coming down, a lot of people are starting to see that, but there's still, you know, a lot of people that are a little skeptical about it happening. And we just want to show everyone like, yeah, no, everyone has a good opportunity at doing it. And even if you end up moving to somewhere else, you know, there's definitely opportunities for everyone.
Well, and in COVID-related virtual jobs, tell your friends you don't have to necessarily move as long as you can get high-speed internet in.
Yeah, that is true.
And in a year or so, with Starlink, that'd be any place.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, we're very excited for all the developments that are happening. And again, we just want to, you know, we want to show the community here everything that's going on. And I think these meetings like that we're having are very informative because you get people from different ages and from different interests all coming together. And even people like Jennifer who are involved in the industry coming in and getting to talk to everybody. So it's definitely a great opportunity.
Well, we definitely are really glad to see your efforts, and we're happy to support in any way that we can. So, and
thank you so much.
And someday we hope to work with you to facilitate a bus trip from Houston to Brownsville so that we could take a tour of the SpaceX thing and maybe see a launch or something.
Oh yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. I'd love to do that too. Yeah.
I would love to come.
And that would be great. Yeah.
And you know, Chicago is also doing a bunch of sophisticated online programs now. So if you're not tied into what that area is doing, you definitely want to get on their list.
Chicago.
Yes, definitely. Mm.
And Ken, also hate to put you on the spot, but I know you do a lot in promoting, you know, science related meetings and making sure everybody's aware of that. I was wondering if maybe you'd like to give a shout out for the Houston Science Enthusiast meetup that you've put together. Okay, and well, Jennifer, I think we're right at the top of time. So if nobody else had anything else, I just wanted to thank you again for coming and spending some time with us and telling us about all the great work that ASTROBOTIC is doing. We definitely would like to come up and see your new facility sometime next year.
Yes, once we get everything online, and of course see how things go with the with the current situation. Once we're able to get in person at some point, but y'all are definitely invited to come visit. And of course, when we have our museum, once that opens up, and would love for y'all to come up and visit us. So thank you, and thank you again for having me. I think for just, you know, my first meeting with you all, you know, I've been involved with the National Space Society for years, but I haven't participated in a particular chapter meeting like this, and I have to say I'm very impressed just with the, the agenda, the content, and the participation, the questions. It's been very exciting to chat with you all. So thank you. And of course, I have to thank Brindley too. That she was the highlight of the of the meeting for me. It was so exciting to see that. I just, to see that excitement, that passion about space and space exploration, science. At that age, that was definitely a highlight to see that. So I can't wait to see what happens next with Brindley, and how you continue to pursue. And hopefully we can get you to Space Camp. And I know that Space Camp is in the, they're trying to raise some funds there right now to keep it open. So hopefully we can see you and get a report after you experience Space Camp in a couple years. But thank you again, Nathan. This was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I should mention that SpaceX, sorry, not SpaceX, Space Camp says they need to raise $1.5 million in order to stay
they did
open.
hit. Oh, okay. I thought I think they're at 1.2 or 1.1 right now.
They're very close. Boeing gave 500,000 yesterday, so that was like, whoa, that really pushed them up. And I think last time I checked, they're like $200,000 or $300,000 short. So it's like really close. I think I'll send out the link to everybody. Even if $10 or $20 may not seem like a lot, but first of all, it adds up. And then second of all, it also kind of, the more people that give little amounts kind of motivates bigger donors to say, yes, this is something that's worth supporting. So
exactly.
If everybody just does a little. Well, I think we'll go ahead and close it off here. So thank you all so much for coming to our August meeting, and it was great to have all of y'all. And look forward to seeing you all at our September meeting.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks for the meeting.
You.
Have a good one.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Jennifer, since you're still here, I have a quick question. If I wanted to get some more information about possible collaborations in business in the future, what would be the best way to, get that started?
With ASTROBOTIC, or just in terms of space in general, or what's the
with ASTROBOTIcs, like to start to get like we have a lot of AI companies that are coming to Texas from the West Coast area. Having another location, would that be something that your company has thought about getting? Because you're in Boston, right?
We're in Pittsburgh, so and we're in Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. Yeah, I think I would say we're mostly focused on driving our presence and keeping our roots in Pittsburgh, as we're about to open this 35,000 square foot lunar logistics headquarters, the first lunar logistics headquarters in the U.S.
Oh wow!
There might be opportunities for us, of course, in the future, to consider something like that. But I think initially, for now, we're really trying to build maintain our presence there. But there's a lot of different partners that we're working with that are, located around the country, and of course, different opportunities in your backyard in Houston. There's, of course, being next to Johnson Space Center and a host of other commercial companies that are there. But I'm certainly happy to, if it's either through Nathan or if there's, I don't know if you have like an online portal or something, or if, feel free to shoot me an email if there's initial questions. The other thing I was going to mention, Nathan, I forgot to mention this before, is I'm happy to share my social media information if anybody is interested to connect that way, or that's also another area where I share a lot of industry-related information, updates, space-related content. But yeah, either way, I'm happy to connect or to answer any questions and forward my contact information.
I sure think that would be great. I know about your Twitter and LinkedIn. If there's any other social media that I could include, I'll just put in the summary of the meeting, and I'll send that out to everybody.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. and I'll forward you my email as well, or you have my email.
Okay.
Awesome. And yeah, Nathan, we'll have to work on that portal, because there's, you know, a lot of, we've talked about doing some sort of collaborations, and with you know, the pandemic, it's, you know, if we could do some space camp online, I think that'd really help with, you know, school districts, and maybe even partnering with the school districts for Houston. So yeah, a lot of
Absolutely.
opportunities. Yeah, and I just found out, you know, I told you I was getting activated, but now there's more, you know, opportunities and resources to help really put these plans together and new businesses together. So we'll talk about that. Maybe we can make a portal. Yeah, like you said, Jennifer, that'd be a good source to have.
Or if you guys start like a Slack channel, or I mean, I know you have a Facebook page, but maybe, you know, you can explore a number of different things to see how you can cross share information and be able to communicate that way. Sometimes email is a little tricky.
Exactly.
Or just a little
hard to follow
what's
the
clunky?
threads.
Clunky is the word. I was like, yeah, exactly.
Sweet. Okay. Well, thanks for the meeting. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.